Alright, so we're going to start by adding to our table of contents. So we're going to skip a line and add Unit 5. And this is going to be SOL 6.1 ratios. And then once you have that copied, you will end up flipping to the next page of your notes, and we will start by writing our heading and our unit number. All right, so since we are starting a new unit, we are starting on the right-hand side of our notebook on a fresh sheet of paper, and we're going to put our unit number, which is Unit 5, in the upper right-hand corner. Our SOL number is 6.1, and that unit is ratios. So we're going to first talk about what a ratio is. We're going to define it. So we're going to answer the question, what is a ratio? So you might, in some of my classes today, some people have heard of what a ratio is, but we're not able to define it. So you may recognize the vocabulary but not know the definition of it. So a ratio is basically a comparison, meaning you're comparing two things. A ratio is a comparison between two quantities. So we want to talk about what quantities means. If you have talked about maybe in science class doing some observations or collecting data, you might have talked about quantitative and qualitative data. One of those has to do with numbers. Quantitative deals with numbers, and qualitative deals with other characteristics, like maybe the color or the shape. So if quantitative data is dealing with numbers, then quantities have to do with numbers. So a ratio is a comparison between two quantities, or in parentheses we will put numbers, in the same set or between sets. And so a set of numbers is basically like a grouping of numbers. So what is a ratio? A ratio is a comparison between two quantities or numbers in the same set or between sets. Okay, I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and we're going to ask another question. How can I write a ratio? And then we're going to answer that question. So there are three ways to write a ratio. We're going to list those three ways. We can write a ratio three ways. The first way is using a colon, which is those two dots that you see, like if you're writing down the time, it's those two dots in between the hour and the minutes. So you can write it using a colon. You can write it using the word to, and I will put that in quotes, or you can use it, you can write it as a fraction. If you write it as a fraction, you would either see a horizontal fraction bar or that kind of diagonal fraction bar. So these are just three different types of notation. We're going to have an example, and then we're going to practice writing it 3 ways. So the first example, or the example for this, is we're going to write a sentence. There are 3 dogs and 2 cats. The question is going to ask us to write the ratio of cats to dogs. So it's not written in a question form, it's telling us what we need to do. But what we are asked to do is find the ratio of cats to dogs. So when we're doing this, you need to pay attention to the order that the words are in the question. So what I mean by that is, I'm going to kind of underline, squiggle, underline where it says the ratio of. This part right here is what should draw my attention, whether it's in a question or it's telling me to do something where it says the ratio of. That is telling me that the order that I need to list my numbers in is coming up next. It's a precursor to the information that I need to use. So the order I'm going to pay attention to when I list my numbers is cats first, because that is listed first in the question, and then dogs. Now, in the sentence above it where it provides the information, my numbers are in a different order because up top it lists dogs first. They can give you the information in any order, but you need to pay attention to the order of the words as they appear in the question. So if I look up to the sentence before it to find what numbers correspond to cats and to dogs, I would see that it tells me there are 2 cats. So I am going to just put the number 2 underneath cats to make sure I put everything in the correct order. And then if I look at dogs, there are 3 dogs. So I just wrote my ratio, and I can carry down that word 2. I literally just wrote my ratio in one of the 3 ways that you can write it. Okay, so this is using the word 2. So the ratio of cats to dogs is 2 to 3. The 2 comes first because when I asked the question, I listed cats first. The other way, or another way that I could write this, would be if I were to, instead of using the word 2, use the colon to separate my numbers. So I would write 2 to 3 like this, and I would still read it the same way. I would still say 2 to 3. Or the third form, the third way to write it would be as a fraction. So it would look like 2/3, but you would still read it 2 to 3 for the ratio. And these are your 3 types of notations. So just a different way to write my ratio. They all mean the same thing, and you would all read them the same. You'd pronounce it the same. So I'm going to go down a little bit, skip a line, and I'm going to ask the next question. What can a ratio compare? So a ratio can have 4 different types of comparisons. So you're going to write a ratio can compare. The first comparison that a ratio can make is one entire set to another set. So one whole set to another whole set. An example would be the number of students in this class to the number of students in science class. So I would be comparing the number of students in two whole classes. So that is going to be a comparison that is whole to whole. It's a whole to whole comparison. It is one whole set compared to another whole set. All right, and then we're going to flip on over to the back, and we're going to write the second comparison. I will use a fresh sheet of paper so that it doesn't bleed through and it's easy for you to see. I used a darker marker that kind of bleeds through the paper a little bit more. Or a darker pen. So I'm going to put number 5 up in the corner still. Okay, this is going to be number 2. This is the second comparison. Part of one set to part of another. So I could be another comparison that a ratio can create. Instead of one whole set to another, one whole class to another, it might just be kind of a subset, a part of it. So the example that we're going to write is going to be the number of boys in this class to the number of boys in science class. So I'm taking a little subset, just the number of boys, out of each of the classes and comparing those parts. So that is going to be a part to part comparison, but it is between two separate sets.